It is dark. It's a dark night. Now, the storyline talks about it being evening when the disciples are gathered in that house in the old city in Jerusalem, the one that has such thick walls. And it has doors, probably a back door and a front door, but they're locked. And the disciples are in there in the darkness. Now, whether that room was totally dark or not, inside of them was this darkness because they were afraid. They were terribly, tragically afraid. What color is fear? It's dark, isn't it? Dark. So dark inside when we're in that horrible fear that can come over us at times. The day had been very bright with the Easter sunrise, women coming to the tomb and finding Christ was risen. Christ had risen. And the tomb, the stone had been rolled away. And the light was shining in what had been a darkened tomb. And even the angel, however many there were, some of the stories say 2 angels, some say 1, but in their dazzling white, they're dazzling angelic, and their voices saying, "Do not fear, fear not, he is risen, he is alive." And the women, I can just imagine they lit up with this news. And they went and told the disciples. That's what the angel said Christ wanted them to do. They had gone to tell the disciples. So when we are seeing the disciples that night in a dark, walled-in, locked-in room, didn't they already know the news? I wonder, though, if they doubted, if they didn't believe. But that really wasn't the issue for them. Their fear was death. Their fear was that the same thing that had happened to Jesus nailed to the cross, that the Jewish authorities would come and find them and nail them to a cross, and that horribly painful death that they had seen their leader go through. Was he really alive? Was he not? But all they could see was this fear of themselves on a cross. Death is frightening. Death was frightening for them. But then Jesus appears through locked doors, through those thick walls, just appeared among them. And they saw him, and he immediately said, "Look at my hands. Touch the nail marks in my hands. Put your hand in my side that was pierced. If you don't believe I'm alive, here's the evidence. I'm before you, and maybe you don't recognize me, but here, you can touch and see for yourself." And when he did that, and as each one perhaps reached out, or they saw the nail marks, they saw the side pierced, and they recognized Jesus. And in that moment, of course, he's already said, "Peace be with you." But somehow they saw the light, saw the clarity, saw, yes, it is true. And so they believed. They believed that beautiful breath of Jesus. And he says, breathe in my peace. What is it like? See, one was not there. Thomas was not there. I wonder where Thomas was. Maybe he was just pacing the streets of the old city. Maybe he was trying to find a hiding place for himself, say someplace that he could tuck away. Maybe the marketplace, the souk, those alleyways in there were a bit deserted because all the other people were leaving the city. Passover was over. They were going back home. The disciples were, though, in their locked room, except for Thomas, but maybe he found a place in one of the empty stalls in the marketplace where he could just tuck away. I almost see him saying the night is coming, and he's curling up in a fetal position, trying to figure out just what had gone wrong. What had gone wrong? Sometimes that's what we do when we're afraid. We just have to crawl off by ourselves. Just sit in a corner and try to figure it out for ourselves. We don't want to be with everybody else. We've just got to hunker down and try to figure out things. Now what are the possibilities? What is the possibility that I will be found? That this fear will overtake me? That I will die like Jesus did. And I don't know. I don't know if he lives. I don't know if he lives or not. That's what they're saying, but I don't know. And the funny thing is, although some of these candles were lit at the very beginning when Christ came in, a couple of them had gone out. I wonder if even some of the disciples in the room where Jesus had breathed peace on them, if maybe they still weren't completely sure. I wonder, but their light, maybe they are not feeling quite so sure after all. Maybe Thomas isn't alone. But there are others, those that went into that room. There's some of us who feel, I want to be with other people when I'm afraid. I don't want to be isolated. I want to be with other people. I want to check out that there are other people alive like I am. And maybe we talk about it, or maybe I just listen to them, but I feel safer when I'm in a group. Some of us like to go off and isolate. Some of us like to gather because there seems to be safety in numbers. Or maybe there's some ideas that can help us all, and we can talk about what we do next. That was the night on the first day of the week. That night that followed the brilliant light of Christ's resurrection. And yet darkness falls. Darkness falls because of fear. Now, the other idea we're dealing with in this passage is the idea of doubt. If fear is black, I wonder what color doubt is. Maybe it's a lighter shade of black. Maybe it's a gray, a charcoal gray or a lighter gray, because it's confusing, almost like being in the midst of a fog. I don't know what to think. I'm confused. I don't know if it's this. I don't know if it's that. I don't know what's going to happen next. I doubt what I've heard earlier, that our Lord has risen. But I still don't know whether or not I'm going to be sought out and be on trial. Do you believe? Do you not believe? Maybe I have to see the evidence, like in a legal court. Maybe it's not just a preponderance of the evidence, not just this piece and that piece and yes, this, that. Maybe it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Thomas is one who says, I've got to see beyond a reasonable doubt before I get back on this bandwagon, before I say, yes, I believe. I'm convicted in my belief. Yes, Lord, I believe. And so it's a week later where Thomas reemerges and comes back to the group. And he's in that room again. I don't think the doors are locked. The walls are still as thick as ever. Jesus doesn't even knock. Jesus comes in that door. And Thomas sees him. And Jesus says, peace I give to you. He says it again. In this passage in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, my peace I give to you 3 times. Once, twice, 3 times. They need to hear this peace being given to them, and they need to feel the breath of Christ on them. You know, when we're in fear or doubt, we feel it in our bodies, don't we? I mean, in fear, it's all this tension in the stomach, the tight muscles here, and we breathe in a very shallow way. Fear just grips. We feel it in our bodies, not just in our spirits. We feel it in our bodies. It's not a mind thing. Fear is a bodily reaction. Our body knows fear. And so Jesus, in 3 times saying, "My peace I give to you," and breathing on them, forces them to deep breathe. If I'm ever in fear and trembling, I find if I deep breathe, it calms me. And this thought of the breath coming in, and it's the breath of the Spirit, that it's holy breath coming in me, calming me, the fear starts to melt some. I don't feel as tense. Maybe you deep breathe too when you are frightened. And doubt, there's something about taking that breath in. The idea is when we breathe deeply, it gives oxygen to us, oxygen to our brain, because doubt, I don't know whether we feel it in our bodies or not. I think we feel it up here in our mind. Fear affects the heart, affects all our organs. Doubt affects our mind. It confuses us, and we have this conversation going back and forth and back and forth. And what we need is feeling the oxygen of that Holy Spirit and that oxygen of the Lord's holy breath giving us clarity. And so our mind is calm and lightened. And yet Thomas doesn't see the light until Jesus says, "Here, you may touch the nail marks in my hands. You may put your hand in my side." And you know, if you read that passage real closely, we don't know. It doesn't say that Thomas reached out to touch the nail marks, or that he reached out and put his hand in Jesus' side. But somehow, at that moment, he says, "My Lord and my God, I believe." By preponderance of all the evidence, yes, I believe. And I wondered if in that second appearance of Jesus to the disciples, those that had begun to doubt themselves, I wonder if they were lit up again. Fear, doubt, confusion. Isn't that what we're feeling now with this crisis that's going on, not just in Jerusalem, not just in Israel, but all around the world? I mean, death sort of stalks us, doesn't it? We are fearful of death, like those early disciples. We want to believe. We want to be calm. We want to take in that holy breath and feel alive again. We want that so desperately, and yet there's a part of us, the fear is deep within. We human people just have a fear of death, don't we? And maybe I might not be as afraid of my own death, but I might be afraid of a child's death, or a grandchild's death, or my neighbor, or my elderly parent, or some dear, dear friend I've had for years. Death stalks us and tries to gather us in fear. So, the end of this story, this beautiful event in this old city house in Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, the doors are open though. But even if they weren't, there is light inside. There is a belief going on. The light of Christ has enlightened those followers of his. But there's an interesting twist to this story, because at the very end, Jesus said, "Do you believe because you see? Because I've showed you the evidence? Is that why you believe?" But then the very final twist to this story is Jesus saying, "Blessed are those who have not seen but yet believe." Blessed are those who've not seen but yet believe. Now you and I today, what do we see of Christ's presence in our lives? We can't reach out and put our hands in the marks where the nails were in his hands, his side pierced. We can't put our hand in there. But there's something about understanding and thinking back over our life when we can think in terms of, oh, I felt something. I felt some light. I felt some clarity. I felt some peace after being so afraid, after doubting, after being confused, after not knowing what was going to happen next. At some point, some sort of light seemed to calm me, some sort of presence. And maybe it was in just one huge event in our lives, and we believed because we felt it and we knew it, and we had some sense that whatever death might have for us, whatever loss, whatever grief and death might have for us, somehow we knew that all was going to be well, that all was going to be well, and that life in some form, the essence of who we are, the loved piece of us, the soul part of us, was going to live on. And even with those who we loved, who maybe go through loss and grief and death. So it might have happened in a just spark of light that comes out, like this, like wow. Maybe it's like Paul on the road to Damascus. And yes, I believe, and I'm committed. Yes, I believe, Lord. Or it may be just something slow over time, but at some point we say, with all these things that have gone on in my life, by preponderance of the evidence, I know, I believe, I know who this Christ is. I know him in my life. I know the light he brings to my life. I know. Maybe a moment in time, maybe over time, but I want so much to know that peace, that calmness. Don't we all? Don't we all? It calms our fears of what death and loss try to do to us, and we move through and we come out with more light than darkness. We follow that light. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." So, my friends, let us walk through this Easter time. Whether we doubted, whether we were fearful, whether we were confused, whatever, let's walk with the light through this Easter time. Ordinary time is coming after that. The journey is not easy, but if we know we have this light within us, this light beside us, we gather with others in the light, we will have courage. We will have heart strength. We will be children of the light and go forth knowing that in the very depths of our being. Amen.